Good morning. I'd like to call to order the Special Corporate Administrative Services Committee meeting of Monday, May 4th, and acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Sechelt Nation and the Squamish Nation, and it is now 9:32 a.m. So we have an agenda in front of us. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? I'd like a motion to adopt the agenda as Andreas, Director Ties.
I believe it's an amended agenda.
Is it an amended agenda? Okay, thank you. The one that I have doesn't say amended, but that's fine. It was amended from the original one that was sent out, correct? No, actually it wasn't. This is the original one that was sent out for this meeting.
Right.
Okay.
We just didn't have one initially.
That's right. That's right. Okay. So we have an agenda. I'd like a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. And a motion to accept the report, accept the report as presented. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. So we'll move to that report. And yes, Director Hiltz.
Process piece, we need to do our declarations or something here?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay.
Yeah. Okay, Tina, did you want to speak to this report?
Yes, Chair. So this particular report just outlines some of the procedural steps here, as well as outlining some of the policy documents that we've covered. So I think one of the items that the committee wanted to highlight is potentially reviewing, based on this particular process, if there would be an opportunity to have another intake, for example, and whether or not we wanted to also review the policy after this meeting as well. So last year, what happened too is we also had a debrief after the grant and aid process, so we could also contemplate having that again after we complete this process.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Yeah, I would very much like to have a second intake this year because so many, the situation has changed so much in the last number of weeks. And I think not only are events not going to go ahead, but I think nonprofit organizations may be rethinking their priorities.
Okay. And then the conversation with regards to, the policy. Would you like to have that at the end of the day today? Director McMahon?
We could start the conversation at the end of the day. We may not, we may need to, give it more consideration, but yeah, I have some concerns about some of the policies.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right. Nothing on the report? You're all okay with the report as it is? So there's one further recommendation that the committee provide direction with respect to the 2020 rural areas grant and aid applications. Would someone like to make that recommendation? Moved. Somebody like to second that? Seconded. All in favor? Thank you. So then a motion to go in camera, that the public be excluded from attendance of the meeting in accordance with section 91A and K of the community charter. Director McMahon?
Yeah, are we going to make a decision on a second intake before we go in camera or after this meeting, or because that's going to affect, the decisions that we make?
I think that will be during the next portion, the in-camera portion. We can come out at the end of that and make whatever recommendations we want to make following that.
Okay.
Okay. So would someone like to make a motion to go in camera? Moved and seconded, all in favor? Thank you. And we'll
Oh, I think we lost Darnelda. She froze.
She either froze or she's really good at Tableau.
Okay, here's a question. What do we do now when the chair is frozen?
We have a vice chair, so Andreas
Right,
can take it on.
As vice chair, I will call a 10-minute break for Darnelda to rejoin. So let's recommence at 1:15.
Thank you. We are back in session with the Special Corporate and Administrative Services Committee meeting of May 4th. And we have a couple of items that have come out of our in-camera session that we'd like to discuss. One is the second intake, and the other is with regards to policy for grant and aid. So let's start with which do you think we should do first? Probably the second intake piece. Okay, so conversation. We need to look at when would we do that? So timing. We also want to look at, do we limit it to those who've already applied, or do we open it up to others? And any other questions around that piece at this point? Tara, do you have anything else that we need to cover off there? That's about it? Okay. So timing. We don't know what's going forward, what's happening, when things are going to open up, to be able to have some of the events, etc., that have been requested funding for. So timing. What would you like to propose? Director Hiltz.
Thanks. I'm still trying to understand the difference between a second intake and just seeking clarification whether the current applicants can do their proposals. I'm still struggling with that. Is there a difference from a procedure point of view and timing? And yeah, that's kind of a question.
Tina?
Sorry. So I think that for the committee's consideration, some of the factors to perhaps consider is, of course, with the changing situation with when these particular applications or the grant and aid process was advertised, the COVID happened sort of right in the middle of it. So understanding that some of these particular grant applications or some of these events may not be able to come forward. So it's the ability for the community to have known that there was potentially a second intake. And so making sure it's fair and equitable for the rest of the community or the grantors. So, making sure that we take into consideration all of these folks took time and effort to submit these applications in time. And so, wanting to make sure that that's considered for them. A lot of what has been, we're seeking clarification on some of these applications. And so would it be, like it's been already framed, are we just looking to seek that clarification and more information and say that we're just going to consider the current ones, or are we going to open it up to the greater community? And or if we are going to have a policy discussion, if for this year we just consider the current application batch with next year having a 2 intake process. So I think those are some of the considerations.
I think the other piece around current applications or the current applicants is there a way potentially later in the fall for them to offer some kind of activity but in a different format? We would need that information provided if they did, because the current application may not actually be something that's valid in the fall. Right? They may still not be able to do the event as presented, but unless we have additional information from them, we have nothing to adjudicate. Basically, it would probably be a no, because we know they can't do it. So how would you want that to be framed for the current applicants and potentially others, if that's where you're going? Director McMahon?
Yeah, I think that what we're really looking for here is more of a clarification. Understandably, the organizations that submitted didn't know what was going to be happening down the road, and none of us do. So I think we want a second chance to consider when this situation has calmed down some and we have a better idea what kinds of programs and activities nonprofit groups are going to be able to offer this year.
So you would say just the current applicants who've applied and see how they have transitioned or modified what their offerings are to provide whatever the activity is in the community, but under the new guidelines. Okay. Any others want to weigh in on that?
I would also add that I'm trying not to use the word unprecedented, but I'm struggling here. Nonprofit groups in the community are finding themselves in financial straits, and so this gives them an opportunity to retune their request according to their new needs.
Okay. Director Ties, you saw your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I'm wondering if I know there's been early September advertisement for an October intake or an October meeting was discussed. I'm wondering, considering that everything is sort of up in the air right now, I hear through the grapevine that the schools are even thinking of reopening this year. Like there's so much uncertainty out there. I wonder if we want to create 2 windows, and if the first window it doesn't feel like it's right, we won't do it, but we could still do that. So let's say maybe like a mid-June window, so that by the time we go into our August break, we could have a decision made, and then a beginning of September in option.
Do you honestly think some of these activities could move forward in June?
No, not in June, but by the time that the process is done, we'll be in August.
But staff won't be around. We won't have meetings in August.
I know, so that's why we need to have the decision made by the end of July for things to happen in August. Or for people not to know that they can still get something done in August when there's still a summer to be had.
Mm-hmm. Tara?
Thank you, Chair. Depending on what method that you're going to go with, whether or not you're going to take new applications or you're just going to reconsider applications that required more information or information about the effect of COVID on events and things, Our process currently starts in February, and we are now at May making decisions. So it's February, March, April, so by the time we advertise and start making all these decisions, it's really a month and a half, 2 month process, at least in the application intake part. Advertising, doesn't have to have quite the lead time perhaps, but definitely about a month and a half of work if we're taking new applications in, just to get everything through. So just to give you an idea of what that looks like, that's why, when we had a conversation of perhaps the fall, like October, we could start working on this in August, staff. And then through September, if you're accepting new applications, you have more time to consider them and then make those decisions. If you're only looking at, as we said, ones that you need to know what the effect is, the discussion goes throughout the summer when these events haven't happened, and depending on COVID, by October, maybe you'd have a better idea. So just to give you an idea of what timing looks like, it takes a little bit longer than just a couple weeks to try and get these kind of things through.
Okay, Director Ties, did you want to address that?
Well, that's why I thought that maybe if we advertise by mid-June, we could make our decisions before the August break as a first window, and then if we don't feel like it's appropriate at that time to ease or that there's no point in going forward with these applications at that point, then we can just say let's do a September intake and make the decisions in October.
So what I'm hearing you say is you'd like to not set a date now, so the letter would just say at some point in the future, and that we revisit it as a board potentially in May or in June, mid-June, and assess at that point if we want to go forward with the intake then, or if at that point we look at it and say no, things are still too closed up, we want to leave it and revisit beginning of September.
That sounds reasonable to me, but I don't know if that works with staff and if that works with the rest of the directors.
Okay. Directors, staff? Director Pratt? No? Director Hiltz?
Sure, thanks. For context, it would be helpful to know the actual dollar value that we're kind of have set aside for future allocation, just to kind of give us some scope of how much effort we want to put into a second round of intake. Because I'm still kind of thinking more that we're looking at revised current applications rather than new applications. That's kind of, so how much money are we actually talking about that we've held back because of uncertainty around COVID?
I can tell you that in 1 second. I have 31,999. Okay, Tara's saying yes. Okay, go ahead, Tara.
So the total that you had available for funding at the start of this process was 105,627, according to the discretionary funds available. And as Director Seegers has said, the total left that I have is 31,999.
Okay, so I guess the question that because this will impact staff as well, the question we want to look at is, are we opening a second intake up to other applicants in the community who have not previously applied, or are we staying only with the ones who have currently applied, who we've said for whatever reason they can't go forward in the current environment? And before I go ahead, who can make me host so I can actually lower people's hands?
Dean, we'll have to let go of the host.
I can try to do that if someone can tell me how.
To make me host, go to participants at the bottom.
Okay, just 1 sec, okay?
Yeah.
Participants, and it says host is me.
Yeah, so if you go to my name, yeah, you should be able to make
host.
Yeah, perfect.
You are now the host.
Thank you.
There we go.
Okay, so Director Lee and Director McMahon I have with hands up, but I don't know if you already, yep, okay. Director Lee, go ahead.
Thank you. I might be in a unique position, but I've got 4,700 left, and I'm fairly confident that 3,000 of that will be used if I go back to the applicants and ask for clarification. So to me, I don't have much left for a second intake. And there is a few others that we actually were asking for, we did want to ask for clarification. I'm very much in favor of very quickly asking the people that did apply and that were making assumptions on their behalf, if in fact they could actually hold their event that they wanted using a different format. And because we are making assumptions on their behalf, and because some people put default things forward, we actually give them some money using their default things. We didn't give the others that opportunity, so I would definitely like to go back and ask them for clarification on the existing ones. And if we are at that point, we'll find out how much money we do have left and whether we need to do a second round. So I'm suggesting that we very quickly get in touch with the people that have already put the applications in and ask them if they can either use the money still, if they still want to apply for the money, or if they can adjust their process to accomplish the same goal in a different manner so we understand better. Or you don't want the money. And after that, we can make a decision whether to go to a second intake or not. But like I say, I'm only $4,700, and I'm pretty sure I've got 3 that they want to use. So, but that's my thoughts.
All right, Tara?
Thank you, Chair. And just, I've sort of totaled all the ones that you have deferred, and the total of the asks is 51,280. So just to put a little perspective around that too. So if you go to another intake, you know, you're looking at what you haven't supplied and what you're actually left over. So then that might give you some consideration, food for thought.
So what you're saying is we are already at $20,000 over what's remaining in the ask that we've deferred, or, okay. Okay, Director McMahon and then Director Ties.
Exactly. You know, we roughly had $100,000 and we roughly had 150,000 in asks. Mm-hmm. We have a number where we've not really made a decision yet. So I am happy with reconsidering the applicants who have already applied, but I do not think it is worth throwing it open again. We don't have the funds, and it's a lot of process and a lot of staff time and a lot of director time to do that. So that's where I'm at. Okay, Director Ties and then Director Pratt.
Well, I hate to throw a wrench into things, but when I discussed it with my committee, some good thoughts raised were, one is that some of the events are very much summer-based and good weather-based. If you're going to have an October approval, then you're looking at a somewhat different event. And at that point, you might want to kind of have a different type of event that you're trying to create, whether it's a Zoom speed dating event is one of the ideas that they threw around, or or we might have a Halloween bash that because by that time things are better, and those are the opportunities that could come down the pipeline. Whereas you know, something like the typical summer events in Roberts Creek are clearly not on for that year, and will drop off the roster if you're going to have an October intake. So I think there should be a second intake.
Okay, Director Pratt.
Thank you. So I think what I'm leaning towards is I like the idea of a second intake overall. Maybe not necessarily for this year, but definitely moving forward. I think it needs to be part of the part of how we move forward with the rural grant and aid. I think for this year, based on the very special situation that we're in, I would be prepared to just reconsider the applications that have already been submitted rather than throwing it out, casting the further net afield. And then maybe, but looking at that as a change within the policy is doing a secondary intake, as we discussed last year as we went through this process as well.
Hey, Director McMahon.
I think we have to assume that summer events are canceled. Pretty much everything. The Writers' Festival is canceled. Sea Cavalcade is canceled. All the major events have canceled. And I think we've just got to consider that this summer is a wash. So I'm perfectly fine with the timeline that staff suggested that we look at this again in September or October.
Okay, Director Lee.
I can't help but think of who is going to put these events on. It's the same group every year that does all this and has the capability of organizing them. They've already put applications in. I can only think of one in my area that didn't. And they are planning on an event later on in the year, hopefully. I'm referring to Pender Harbor Days. They would like to, they would still put one on later in the year on a modified. And then I'm thinking of my music society here in Pender. And if they can, if they could hit October, November, December, do it every week, they would, I think, if they had sufficient planning. And so my whole point is you got to give them some time to plan. These things don't happen in a week. They don't happen in a month. They happen in about 2 months. So if we are going to open it up, we're going to have to do it really quick. But I'm still in favor of asking our existing people if they can still put something on. And if not, then opening it up. And I think we could simply ask them in a month. Like by the end of May, we would know whether they could put something on or not. They've got their people together and their structure together. And then we could go forward and ask for a second intake if we have money left over. Anyways, that's my thoughts.
Okay, Kara?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. And part of the policy as well, if you look down into timing of applications, we try to keep it within the intake because of, you know, the staff time and the ease of having everybody do it at the same time. But there is a provision in the policy which says if timing is an issue for your application and you are able to submit one at some time and it could go to consideration at a committee. So it doesn't stop people from applying if there's something that they'll need sometime in the year. And that's part of the policy as it stands right now. So I don't know, there's another consideration rather than maybe a full intake to suggest to people if you have a Pender Harbor Days coming up in September, October, maybe it's a one-off application that the committee will consider at a CAS committee or something.
So I think what I'm hearing Director Lee say is, in the letter that goes out to the applicants that we wanted to potentially fund, but we don't believe that their offering or whatever can go forward in the form it is that we have reserved some funds and we're willing to reconsider their application if they can come forward with a plan for how it can be delivered in the environment that we're currently in. And we could say that we want to have those considered by the end of June. So that would mean that everybody who's got their, I mean, that kind of fits with what we're saying here. And then we could if they come forward and say, well, we can't do that, or we're not going to do that, we don't plan on doing that, then in September, we could potentially look at a second intake if we want to do that. If none of these go forward and we've got basically $32,000 sitting, then you can look at it at that point and say, yes, we want to do another intake. Yes, it's a lot more work, and we would open that to the public. But what you're saying is you want to give these people who've applied now first dibs basically on the money, but only if they can't use it, then we'd look at another intake. Does that work? What am I missing? Director Hiltz.
I think that's summarizing. Get more information about what we have right now, figure out what we can do in the future. But as things change quickly, even to plan September seems like, I'd like to give the applicants who made the deadline so far the first kind of right of refusal. And is there a difference between a revised application and a completely new application? Or but I'm definitely get more information and then go for if there's funding in September. As Tara said, people can submit. So I'm definitely on that wavelength. Yeah.
Okay, so we don't have to do the second. We don't have to make a decision about the second intake at this point. We could just look at June. What do you want to do? Right? Would you like to, in the letter, indicate that we are requesting additional information if there's a way for them to provide their offering in a different model that will achieve the same results or similar results? We're willing to evaluate that and consider it for potential funding. Director Hiltz?
Yeah, that's kind of where I would like to see it go. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Director Lee's give it a thumbs up. Okay. Right. Any other comments on that? Would someone like to make a recommendation then to that effect? Director Hiltz? Tara, did you want to read something? I don't know if you've got something. All my ramblings.
Okay, thank you, Chair. You can tell me if you want to add or change anything, but this is what I've recorded so far. That there be a second consideration of some applications by June 30th, 2020, which may have been affected by COVID-19, and those that require more information for clarity and possible adjusted timelines.
Okay. That works? Okay.
And I just have one clarification for Sherry.
Yeah.
Does this need to go to another special meeting, or is this something that could be done at a committee, or because these were in camera, so now that would mean
we're not in camera. We're not in camera.
The ones that were discussed for more information was held in camera. So would we need another special in camera, or would we be able to attach it to a regular cast committee, just in terms of timeline?
What step are you talking about?
To bring these back for reconsideration is what I've just read, the ones that were in camera already. If they're bringing those back to consider them again, does it have to be, it should be in a camera session? Can it be tagged on to a cast committee, or?
It probably should be the same process, I would say. They'll go back for reconsideration in camera, and then once the decision is made, we'll bring them out.
Right, but not a special, like it's not a special meeting. It could be put onto a meeting.
Right, if it meets within the meeting schedule, I don't see any reason why not.
So on our open agenda prior, like that we started this meeting with, there is a list of all of the applicants and what they requested. That's public. Not the decisions we made around that, but the list is there. So that's all public information. So I don't know how that ties into this conversation. Does that help you, Tara? Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think per Sherry, like if I was to get the information out to those people that you wanted more information from, and they weren't able to reply, say by the June cutoff for the CAS committee, we could have those discussions in camera and then still likely make the October deadline to get, you know, the funding out to whatever people. So that works. That basically answers my question. It would be an in-camera discussion, and as part of the agenda, you know, whatever information I could get back by the cutoff for that meeting.
Okay, so that'll just have to be communicated.
Yeah, so the June 30th, what I read back would work. It seems to be fine.
Okay. All right, so we have a recommendation. Director Hilt, do you want to speak to that? It hasn't been seconded yet, still on the floor to be seconded. Seconded, okay. Director Hilt.
Yeah, in the language of the recommendation, for me, the primary reason we're asking is can these applicants comply with public health orders? That's essentially what we're asking them. We're, you know, to be specific, can they do these things with the public health order? So I would focus on that as a recommendation. That's kind of where I'm, not COVID, it's the public health orders that we're talking about.
Right. Because those change. Yes, and we don't know what they're going to be. All right. Did you want to hear the motion again that's on the floor? Yes, please. Okay. Once you have that modified, Tara, we'll hear that.
Thank you, Chair. Recommended that there be a second consideration of some applications by June 30th, which may have been affected by COVID-19, specifically the public health order, and those that require more information for clarity and adjusted timelines.
Does that cover it off, Director Hiltz? Okay. Any other comments or questions on the recommendation on the floor? All right, all those in favor? Thank you. Now, policy. It sounds like what staff would like to hear on policy is, first of all, two things. Do directors need more time to consider, even just to come up with a list of the things they want staff to look at with regards to policy? Or are they ready to give that information and direction to staff now for staff to go away and look at the various aspects that we've identified? Director Ties.
I certainly would like a report on the options of recurring applications and what can be done about those. And policy does not permit them, yet they come back year after year, and some of them are very crucial community events, in my opinion.
Okay, Director McMahon.
I agree with that. If we find ourselves violating our own policies year after year, then perhaps there's something wrong with the policies. We have a lot of issues around, and I think we have a staff report coming around emergency types of equipment. Requests keep coming in. I'm curious as to when the maximum amount for grant and aid was last changed, and whether there's any appetite to revisit that or not. There is a bunch of wording in our policies around how organizations should strive to become self-sustaining. And I don't think that's realistic, because many organizations do things that cannot be self-sustaining. That's why they're there. And I feel that that's sort of political statements that don't necessarily belong in the policy. I do, support things like showing that this is of benefit to the rural areas, because we're the rural areas. That makes sense. Looking for organizations to find many sources of funding. That's a good thing too. But those were some of the ones that I flagged. Oh, and the form. The box on the form is locked. So if somebody types in 300 words, they become microscopic and you can't actually read them. Can we fix the form somehow? That would be nice.
Okay, Director Lee.
Well, I agree the policy should be revisited, and especially based on our experience right now. I don't think we should rush into it. I think we need to give ourselves time to have a look at it before we get there, and in a nice cool with lots of time, revisit the policy, including after getting some recommendations from staff, because I believe they know exactly what our issues are here. They probably know it better than us. And so if we were to have a meeting just to look at this policy and do it then, I think it would be better. When you rush things, you'll get it wrong.
So I have a question for staff. I know that our accountant has come forward and said, we can't do this, like year after year after year. I don't see anything in the community charter that says that. So I'm wondering if that's an accountant perspective or if that is a legal perspective. Yeah, Tian?
Yeah, so it's essentially Local Government Act. So from that perspective, if you continue to fund something, you should be creating a service for it. And so we have had this reviewed both from the ministry and from our auditors a few years ago.
Okay, Director McMahon?
There must surely be some sort of monetary limit on this, because if we're giving the Water Polo Association money for balls, I mean, we don't need to create a service for balls. That wouldn't make sense.
Okay. Anybody else? So there have been a couple of things put forward. Staff can probably indicate those in the notes, but it sounds like majority of you would still like to have a little bit more time before we actually send staff off to create a report or revisit this bylaw. When would you like to? I would say we should set a date by when information should be submitted to, maybe just by email at this point, but then we bring that forward to have a conversation at another CAS meeting or something. Yep, Director McMahon.
Well, clearly we should revisit our policy before the budget would make some sense. So if we can start the conversation rolling, but maybe look at reviewing the bylaw in, say, September, something like that, September, October. Does that make sense?
So it sounds like we should probably have information, like have put the thought in by July. So how about if we say we have this topic of policy come back to the July CAS meeting? So if you all know that it's going to be on that meeting that we're going to discuss it, then that gives you basically 2.5 months to put your ideas together, do your research, etc. Does that work? And then that also gives staff, because if we're going to, the other conversation that's going on here is if we're looking at doing budget by the end of December, that means we'll be getting into budget in September, which means you need to know what the policy is in order to set aside your money, right? Director McMahon?
I'd also be interested in any staff feedback on our process for grant and aid, if there's anything that we can do to improve the process, or if there's any, stumbling blocks. We also had several questions arise this round about things that might be funded through other SCRD avenues. And is there, should we have something in our process to flag that sort of thing before it even comes to the committee? I don't know. Just some thoughts.
Yeah, the other one that I wrote down was covering deficits. I had covering deficits. Ongoing yearly event. Right, and the second intake was something else. Yeah, Tara?
Thank you, Chair. Last year we had a grant and aid debrief. That was a request of the committee to have a debrief report. So that these types of things, I think I've made some notes anyway, but we can probably do a staff report to the July meeting as you suggested, with some of these debrief notes, and have the policy come out and have everybody take a look at it. So I don't know if that just makes sense to have that report just come as the debrief.
Okay, does that work for the directors? Okay, do you need a recommendation to that, Tara? No? Okay. All right, anything else that we need to discuss at this time? You mean we're done? We get lunch? Director Pratt.
I'm just going to move to adjourn.
They moved, seconded? All those in favor? Thank you. All right. So, to staff, are there any questions? Do you have anybody watching?
Nope, public gallery is empty.
Awesome. So let's wrap. Thank you, people. Thank you, everybody. It's been a very productive morning.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay. See you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.